Well, good evening. This is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 17th of December, and we're once again following the protests in France, in Paris more specifically, about the hike in the fuel tax and the carbon tax, and the protests now spread into basically trying to get rid of Emmanuel Macron, the president. Now, these protests have also spread down into Belgium, and this is over the immigration pact, the UN immigration pact that has recently been ratified, but there is quite a strong presence in Brussels that is not keen on this idea at all. Now, when we go through some of the examples that I picked out here, and let me first just put this into context, by the way. This is something that I think is going to start spreading around the world. I think it's important that we pay attention to the underpinnings of why these things happen. When you push things over to people coming out in the streets to protest in large numbers, something has gone very, very wrong with the social pact between the government and the people. And I think it's important that we understand that, and the only way we can understand is by reviewing not only the events taking place, but some of the events leading up to them, and maybe some of the indicators that are presenting themselves right now that might show where there could be potential issues down the road. So without further ado, let's go right on over and take a look at some of these stories. Here we go. This is France. Yellow Vest protesters defy government to gather. This is December 15th, 2018. And I just want to play you this little clip. It's only 3 minutes long, but it really does sum up what is going on here.
Most people feel that the liberal democratic system is failing them.
Je pense que la colère était bien au-delà des taxes. Hein. Je vois vraiment ce que disent les gens, ce qu'il y a sur les pancartes. Là, qui demandent une société beaucoup plus horizontale, des référendums, une démocratie directe.
It was nothing to do with fuel at the beginning, was it? It's moved into something else.
Protests resembling France's Yellow Vest movement have spread across Europe, from Belgium to Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and the UK.
The concerns that are at the heart of this movement are also concerns in many other countries. It's an easy identifiable symbol, a little bit like the Guy Fawkes mask. In France, is obligatory to have in your car, so everybody has a vest like that.
But while they may look the same, how do we know they're part of the same movement as their French counterparts? For one thing, who's running the show?
These movements don't have a clear, strong leadership structure or an organization that kind of binds these people together.
It's also hard to tell if all the protesters in yellow vests share the same goal.
There is a kind of tendency of these newer movements that are propelled by social media to not have clear demands, or have so many demands that it becomes almost empty, and that there is no clear meta-narrative that binds these fragmented issues and demands together. And that makes it very easy for the extreme right, for example, the fascists, as well as a kind of more radical left, to co-opt these movements.
But how does the symbol of a French movement, sparked by fuel taxes, become adopted by British people campaigning for Brexit?
The anti-EU sentiments that are part of the Yellow Vest also has to do with kind of populist moment that we live in, where conflict is articulated between the people and an out-of-touch elite.
We want to look after our own futures, the same as they do. We want to protect ourselves and our jobs, and not let the governments take all the money.
The aftermath of the 2008 crisis has in many ways led to the elite becoming more richer, inequality rising, and ordinary people having paid the price for that, and that still feeds an enormous sense of indignation.
So if the wounds of 2008 still haven't healed, can we expect to see more yellow vests on the streets of Europe?
Where it will go next will depend on how political elites react. It might be the case that we need to wait what will happen with Brexit in this country to kind of see whether some people will appropriate the symbolism of the yellow jacket.
This is The Independent. Brussels protests. Police use tear gas on anti-immigration demonstrators outside EU. And you can see quite a confrontation taking place here. Police used tear gas and water cannons on right-wing and far-right demonstrators who gathered outside EU headquarters in Brussels to protest against Belgium's adoption of a global immigration pact. About 5,000 people assembled for the anti-immigration rally on Sunday, which local authorities had initially banned over fears of violence. Belgium's High Court overturned the ban, citing the right to peaceful protest. Police in Brussels say some of the protesters became violent when they were asked to disperse. Okay, so here we go. Immigration. EU nations increasingly divided over UN migration pact. Just days before scores of countries sign up to a landmark UN migration pact, a number of European Union nations have become joining the list of those not willing to endorse the agreement. Despite its non-binding nature, Bulgaria signalled this week that it will not sign the pact, as did Slovakia, whose foreign minister resigned in protest at its government's stance. Meanwhile, Belgium's government was teetering on the brink of collapse, riven by coalition differences over the pact. It's way too pro-migration. It doesn't have the nuance that it needs to have to also comfort European citizens, Belgium's migration minister Theo Franken said Thursday. It's not legally binding, but it's not without legal risks, he said, adding that rights laws are being interpreted widely in EU courts and those rulings are tying the hands of migration policy makers. And so what do the polls say? Most Europeans want immigration bans from Muslim-majority countries, poll reveals. 47% of Britons want to stop immigration from Muslim-majority countries. Okay, so here we have the poll results. We have as high as 63% in Belgium. Poland, 70% in Poland, and as low as 40% in Spain. The ban was supported by 71% of people in Poland, 65% in Austria, 53% in Germany and 51% in Italy. In the UK, 47% supported a ban. In no country did more than 32% disagree with a ban. Okay, so why are so many nations suddenly following Trump out of the proposed UN migration pact? This is on the Washington Post. And December the 4th, the Belgian coalition government suffered a severe setback Monday after its biggest member party said it would oppose the country's participation in the pact. In neighbouring Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel's successors as party leader have also clashed over the pact as they head into a key vote on the Conservative Party's future this weekend. Meanwhile, the governments of Australia, Austria, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Israel, Poland, Slovakia and Switzerland have determined that they will not sign the proposed pact or that they will delay a decision. Okay, so let's flesh this out a little bit. What is the UN Migration Pact? The non-binding agreement is the result of a broader plan agreed to 2 years ago by all 193 members of the United Nations with the aim of making migration more humane and orderly. The years before the agreement were dominated by news of refugees and migrants dying in the Mediterranean and Aegean seas as they tried to make their way to safer countries in Europe. Although regulations exist to prevent the exploitation of refugees who flee war or prosecution, there is no agency that monitors the exploitation of migrants who leave their countries for economic reasons. The UN Pact is supposed to create conditions that will make migration a more orderly process and prevent a repeat of some of the chaotic scenes that marked the past few years. What's the criticism? Early criticism, mainly from European far-right parties, with Germany's Alternative for Germany, AfD, lashing out at it as a disguised mechanism to allow more migrants into Europe. The underlying scepticism isn't unique to fringe parties any longer, however. Some of the first European countries to pull out were Hungary and Austria, which have gone to great lengths to stop migration flows. Hungary built a fence on its border with Serbia and Croatia after it became a transit country for refugees and migrants heading to Western Europe in 2015. In Australia, the migration influx helped the far right to gain power last year as part of a coalition government. The criticism voiced in those countries has largely echoed the United States' justification to pull out last year. The deal with the US officials that the United Nations argued last December contained numerous provisions that are inconsistent with US immigration and refugee policies and the Trump administration immigration principles. So there you go. All of a sudden, people are not too keen on having unrestrained immigration into their country. And we're just going to have to wait and see how all of this plays out in the coming months. Now, I think you can clearly see by those stories that this issue has been coming on for a long time, and some of those statistics really do point, like every person in agreement, we're talking between 40 and 60% in agreement, and nothing over 36% in disagreement, and an awfully large mushy middle, as they call it. It is a big issue in Europe. This has changed the landscape of so many people's countries, and it has shown no signs of abating. And now this UN pact, even though it's non-binding, well, there was a comment there in one of the stories, it's not to be taken lightly. But you wait and see. In 2 years, you will find that there is a more concrete kind of deal put together based on the one that's in existence. And of course, those who have already signed will find it really quite difficult to refuse to sign on to this new, more concrete, more binding type of agreement. So this puts them in a very difficult position just because they agreed to a non-binding. And, this is actually a bit of a cautionary tale in real life, because you quite often find that these kind of deals that are maybe not quite palatable, this is how they present them initially, as a non-binding, oh, don't you worry, we're doing a trial run. We're just going to see what it looks like, and we will remain open. Well, that's usually not what happens, regardless of the outcome. Okay, and whilst I see that migration is a good thing, it is, I think, great to be sharing skills, but I think every country needs to be able to control the skills that they have coming in the country to not create shortages. If you've got too many plumbers already, why would you allow more plumbers to come in the country? And that's not a personal thing, that's just, we need carpenters, or we need mechanics, or, we need underwriters, or we need electricians, or whatever it is. We should be allowed to choose that, because we are, of course, trying to make our own country better through migration. I myself am an immigrant, and I think that in the last 37 years I have been a productive member of this country. I love being Canadian. I became a citizen as soon as I possibly could, and I have completely and fully integrated in the country called Canada. So I think it's a great thing that we can move around and we can choose the country we live in. But the country that we live in, when I came into this country, it was not just a walk through the front door. It was a 6-month process. I'd come over here originally to visit my father and fell in love with the country, but I had to go back to England. I had to go to interviews at the Canadian consulate in London. I had to fill out a questionnaire. There was a point system where I had to achieve 50 points on a means testing system, and it was, having a relative who could support me in Canada was huge. That was 25 points. But being able to speak English, having a trade, I was a mechanic at that time, which was required in Canada, these all had to add up to 50 points. And so I had no problem with going through that process. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these stories, and if you did, please like and subscribe below. We are whistling towards 5,000 subscribers, and I thank you all for subscribing. There was no loss of subscribers, where the YouTube went through the other day and had a big clean out, a dusting and a cleaning, as they say. And hey, I'm still right up there with 4,700 subscribers, and I thank all of you who have subscribed. And please continue to comment. I'm enjoying your comments, and we'll talk to you very soon. It's Hound Dog Steve signing off. You take care now. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye.